Hello everybody, welcome to number 27. I'm Jack and this is a truly bonkers ISO Lele. Now believe it or not, this car was designed by Gandini. It has what can be described at best as a very unusual look. We're going to talk more about that later, but first, a little bit of history. ISO Rivolta is an Italian manufacturer and one that many people probably won't even have heard of. It started off in, I think, 1900 or something along those lines as a fridge manufacturer. It was then bought in the late 30s by Renzo Rivolta. He was an absolute sort of automotive nut and immediately started to change the production from fridges, ice boxes, towards motorbikes and eventually also the Isetta, the little ISO, which was also sold under license, or BMW built under license in Germany, and it ended up saving BMW. At that point it was really on a sort of a knife edge, on a balance whether it would survive or not. How ironic when you look at what happened to ISO, which went bankrupt in 74 or 75, and then you look at BMW today. Most of you will know ISO, if you know it, through the Grifo, which is a much more classically styled car, much better known than this, and came out before the Lele. The name of this car goes back to Piero's wife, Rachele. Lele is short for Rachele, and so this car was kind of dedicated to her. Now, it's a very interesting design. From what I saw online, and when it first arrived today and I saw it roll up, I thought, yeah, that just doesn't quite work. But as I've spent a bit more time with it, with the camera, taking some different angles and so on, it's grown on me a little bit. I don't think you're ever going to say it's a classically pretty design, but it is interesting and it has some really nice angles as well. Let's quickly see how it goes down the road. A couple of provisos really. This has the Ford Cleveland 351 cubic inch engine. It's a wet day and this has very old tyres, so I'm going to be quite careful. He says, okay, absolutely no grip, loads of torque, old tyres, recipe for disaster. It's the corners though where I am going to take care. Also because these don't have the best reputation in terms of the wet handling. The Lele was launched in 1969. It was supposed to fill the gap between the Grifo and a car that even I never knew existed called the Fidia, which was a four-door ISO. The thing is though that even when launched, it was a particularly strange proposition in terms of market segment, because it's got two doors, it's got four very usable seats. It obviously looks, I don't know what it looks like. It doesn't look like a sports car, certainly, but it looks bigger than a 2+2, but not big enough to be a saloon. It wasn't a commercial success. That can be down to the way it looks, perhaps, to some degree, but I think also just that it had such an unclear market segment. Perhaps the closest rival would have been the Jensen Interceptor. They also talked about the XJ series of the Jags, and in theory it was supposed to be a competitor for the Lamborghini Espada. Now the Lamborghini is another car that, to my eyes anyway, looks a bit odd, but it is a more successful design. Incredibly, they were both designed by Gandini while he was at Bertone. The Lambo also comes with a V12 rather than the more mundane American-sourced V8. But, this is quite important, I think that the ISO is more of a quality product than the Lamborghinis that were made at that point in time. Fit and finish in here is actually pretty good, as it was in the Grifo that I drove before. The way it's thought about, designed, the way it feels, it's, you know, and obviously you have the reliability of the American V8. Mechanically, this is pretty identical to a Grifo, so double wishbones at the front, solid axle at the back. The original versions, until from 69 I think till 72, came with General Motors engines, which varied between 300 and 350 horsepower. From 72 on, I think there was some sort of disagreement with GM, and a Ford motor was, the Cleveland 351 was taken instead, which has 325 horsepower. Let's just try and do another little acceleration up the road where we turn around here. I'm still just a little bit wary of the ridiculous lack of grip that we have today. Now, something else is the turning circle is, you know, for a car like this, which is supposed to be a GT, I think in town in particular, it would kind of get in the way because it is pretty dreadful. Right, and off we go. Plenty of power there. Today I'm not really going to be able to drive this car very hard. I don't think driven hard is the best thing. Although, having said that, Fred has a race car version of one of these as well. So he had two. And that's putting out 600 horsepower, and he says it sticks to the road like glue. The steering on this, not particularly quick, but it has nice feel, weighing, it's progressive. The brakes as well, they feel pretty good. Crucially, this has power steering, which is, I think, one of the main differences with the Grifo. I was trying to rack my brain about how this felt different to the Grifo, and there is a lot of similarity, I think, but the power steering does make a big difference. It makes it easier to drive. It's a comfortable car. The seats are lovely. Fred was telling me that in comparison to his other car, for some reason, this one moves around more. He thinks it's to do with the seats. You do move around, but it's not unpleasant. The suspension is really quite pliant, and I can see how this would make an absolutely brilliant and effortless GT. The way the heating, the vents work, you know, Fred taught me through it. It's very confusing. So ergonomically, it's not great. At least the instruments are really visible. The driving position itself, which I guess is more important really than the other ergonomics and the switches and so on, driving position is perfect. There's not that much to say about the Cleveland. We know what they are. They were made in the millions, and plenty of torque low down, roughly sort of woofly noise, not a super revvy engine. I think it really suits the character of the Iso. The way you've got all the instruments there on the passenger side but facing you, it feels like a special place. Loads of room in the back, loads of room as well on top. It is said that the original owner, Renzo, always decreed that you should be able to wear a hat in your Iso. It's also really quite refined in terms of the engine you hear, but you hear it just enough for the pleasant part of it, the little woofly noise. Tyre noise, not really noticing it at all. Wind noise is also quite absent, so I think it had some of the right ingredients. Okay, road was a bit drier there, so I was able to keep my foot down for a little bit longer, and there really is plenty of power. You know, these Fords, these Clevelands, they don't rev to the stars, but they do progressively give more power as they go up the rev range. So it wasn't a success, and just 285 Leles were ever made. Very, very few for the UK. I came here today because I was interested in such a strange looking, rare car. And obviously I have a soft spot for anything Italian. I didn't know what to expect. And although clearly there are some limitations, I can't comment on the chassis because it's just impossible on these old tyres, but reports would say that grip in the wet was really lacking. There is that very limited sort of turning circle, which if you're going to use it as a GT, if you're going to be in town, will get in the way. So though I think the ventilation system also is a little bit haphazard, to be generous, and the looks are very controversial, but I'm coming away from this test with a bit of affection for the Lele because it feels like a good car. I like the general feel of overall quality, and it is a very nice thing to drive and a very unusual car. So this Lele is currently for sale. If you're interested, I'm going to put the details in the video description. If you'd like to see more reviews on quirky cars like this, please do consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell. It does help. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you very much to Fred for bringing this down, and I very much look forward to seeing you all soon.